For the longest time, the ostrich epitomized what I learned that it took to be successful. Seriously, the ostrich. The ostrich was big and bold and fast. You need those things to be successful. And it keeps its head down to stay out of trouble. These were the things that I was told that it took to be successful. Be bold, do the things, have your plan, but keep your head down, right? Keep your head down, focus, keep going, focus on the things you need to do. Keep your head down, stay out of the way, stay out of trouble, don't raise a stink, right? Don't draw too much attention to yourself, especially when things might be rocky. All about the ostrich. So imagine my dismay when I learned, not too long ago actually, that the ostrich does not, in fact, bury its head in the sand at all. Am I the only person in this room that did not know that? Right. The ostrich does not bury its head in the sand at all. Y'all, this rocked my world. This may seem like a very small thing to you, but to me, it sort of epitomizes the way that things that I thought to be true were absolutely true, right? The ostrich buries its head in the sand. This is a truth around which I built this whole image of what it is to be successful, right? I thought my reality was solid. And then all of a sudden, not so much true at all, which then led me down an existential hole to explore if how I was acting, if the things I had built my life on were in fact the ways that I should be acting and building my life. Now, you may giggle at me, but this is true. It rocked my world to find something I thought to be solid was actually not at all true. It epitomized for me the breaking apart, the bottom opening feeling when what I thought would be true about my life wasn't true. And so that strong emotional reaction, perhaps you have had this at certain points in your life when things you thought were true aren't, and you feel like the ground beneath you is falling. And your response is negative, and everything seems to have shifted. And so perhaps it should be no surprise that today's gospel reading, the beginning of the church year, the first Sunday in Advent, when we want to be talking about sweet baby Jesus and the loveliness of the manger and the cuddlies and the baby smells, and at least the setting up of the decorations and the putting up of the tree, or perhaps the baking or the wrapping of presents and the beautiful nostalgia glory that we associate with this season. And instead, this gospel leaves us unsettled, frustrated, wary, and maybe afraid. It's a talk of massive destruction, of earth-shattering things happening. It is apocalyptic literature, right? Apocalypse is being described in this. And our modern use of the word apocalypse means destruction. And so we hear this apocalyptic literature and we think about destruction and it scares us. But the Greek use of the word apocalypse is not destruction. The Greek use of this word and this type of literature was more about uncovering, revealing, bringing new insight, revelation. And so here we see why new revelation, uncovering, revealing might be the start to the Advent season, to the start of the season where we anticipate Jesus. And we might understand why we start this season not with the baby in the manger, but with Jesus at the end of his life in the Temple of Jerusalem, revealing to people the importance of his ministry here on earth. This huge language that he uses, these images that he uses are supposed to shock us. They're supposed to shake us. They're supposed to have that, oh my gosh, the things I thought were true aren't true feeling. It's supposed to have us question the life we live, the world we live in, how things operate. Jesus wants us, Jesus begs us, implores us to let our understandings of things be cracked. Jesus wants us to open ourselves to the revelation that what we thought was true might not be. And the way the world works might not be the best way for the world to work, and there might be another way to do it. I can feel the panic welling up from those very cracks in my soul already. Do y'all know why ostriches are said to be buried their heads in the sand? Anybody know? It's because they dig nests in the sand. They dig their nests and they lay their eggs in the sand. And so when we see pictures of ostriches with their heads in the sand, they are going down there and turning the eggs so that they are fully protected. The ostrich burying its head in the sand is not, in fact, trying to protect itself or to stay out of trouble or to keep itself alive at all. It is protecting the most vulnerable thing it can find. Isn't that cool? Jesus lived his life exclusively to orient around, to connect with, to protect, to advocate for, to love, to liberate the most vulnerable people he could find. He looked for the oppressed, the downtrodden, and loved them and cared for them and got to know them and asked questions and did everything he could to orient his life to their salvation. And this is the life. This is the orientation. This is the focus that we are called to have in our lives. And so Jesus speaks this earth-shattering truth so that we pay attention, so that we look at ourselves, so that we look at our orientation around what do we build our lives, around our systems, around our structures, and yes, around our church, around what do we build it? And I'm here to tell you, it hurts. It hurts to see where I have not and do not live my life truly oriented towards Jesus and the least and the lost. It hurts to see where the groups, the institution, and yes, the church that I love are not always oriented around Jesus's truth and the least and the lost. And every time I catch a glimpse of that, I scramble to put my head back down and avoid the pain and confusion it causes me. And I'm not alone. This is human nature. When we feel pain, we want to avoid it, and so we run away. Many of us in this congregation who have been attending our intergenerational Tell Me the Truth About Racism course, many of us who have been attending Sacred Ground and having other conversations about how the church orients itself in this world after we're breaking through with the pandemic, find that what we thought about the world or our society, about ourselves, turns out not to be the full truth, sometimes not the truth at all. And it's confusing. And the cracks in our reality hurt and feel like a chasm we could fall through. The Reverend Canon Stephanie Spellers, in her book, Church Cracked Open, says, some people still cling to their original closed picture of reality, mostly because they're terrified that if a crack forms, that crack might be the beginning of truly losing their life or life as they have known it. People will do almost anything to not experience that loss. I find that to be true. And yet we know as Christians that to die, to lose something is to gain bigger truth. That is the truth around which we orient our entire lives. That is the core of our faith. If we let things go, if we let them die, life will be reborn new and better. That is the truth that Jesus is bringing to us on this first Sunday of Advent. Jesus urges us, even in the midst of this apocalyptic language designed to open our eyes, says to us, do not let your hearts be weighed down with the weight of things that distract you from the truth. Do not let your hearts be weighed down with the worry. Do not let your hearts be weighed down with the fear that you can't possibly live. Instead, do not give in to the temptation to ignore these new revelations, but hold your heads up. Listen, look, see, and be held by my love, my life, my truth. Jesus knows that when our lives, our worlds seem to be falling apart, when our lives, our worlds have developed cracks, when we are most uncertain, that it is then that we are most able to see God's revelation through the cracks and be touched by the grace of it all. When the earth shakes, when the foundations crumble, Jesus is there, raising us to new life, holding us up as we lift up our heads, Maybe instead of ostriches, we need to be meerkats. I love a meerkat. They pop up out of the hole and they look around. Aren't they cute, right? Maybe we need to be meerkats, jumping up out of the hole, up out of the safety and looking around, opening ourselves to what is seen around us, to open our eyes, to heed Jesus's call to lift up our heads, no matter what we might see when we see it, to lift up our heads, to see what we might need to let go of within us, to let God's life shine more fully, to lift up our heads, to see how we might not actually be oriented towards Christ, and to be open how we might reorient so that we are. To lift up our heads, to see what we might need to let go of that we hold on so dearly to, so that God's love can actually fill us and spill out and over. To lift up our heads so we can see the birth and the new birth and the rebirth of the world in the person of Jesus Christ. The Reverend Caroline Lewis, who is a contemporary theologian, says, "The birth we anticipate will bring with it deaths we have to accept." As we anticipate the coming of Christ, we lift up our heads. We listen to where we are and aren't oriented towards God and God's most vulnerable people. We let God's truth bathe us and fill us and hold us. Let those deaths die that need to die and move forward together, healed, restored, forgiven, bathed in the grace of God, step by step towards new life, new truth, and a changed world.